News, breaking news. What does that even mean? Why did he change it? What news is he talking about? All this and more, right now. Hope you're having a beautiful day. I hope you're thriving and you're ready for this episode of Mr. Zeppo Talks About the News. Let's get started, folks. The Grand Old Party. What are they doing with Obamacare? Or, as the headline reads, it's official. They are replacing Obamacare with, drumroll please, Obamacare. Obamacare Light, some are calling it. Obamacare stripped of all the things that made it work is what I call it. File this under the category of, are they trying to get fired? Because what they've essentially done is cut and paste all the bullet points that sound nice and also that aggravate people regardless of party line when threatened, and they took out all the nasty bits about taxing, generating revenue and providing it for everybody. So now it's, just those who can afford it. And the people who get taxed the most are the ones who can barely get by. Same old grand old party political tricks. Tax the willing, give it to the wealthy, and, carry a big stick about values and fighting for the little guy and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I wanted to take a step back before anybody gets caught up in the argument of what is and is not Obamacare and look at some interesting facts. A bunch of polling, and I don't have the names off the top of my head, and this is an opinion show, and I don't have a team, so you can suck it on the research. Go do it yourself. Look up, I'm sure you can find this. A bunch of polls indicate that asked the same question about the same healthcare problems and the same healthcare bill, people responded differently, whether the question called it Obamacare or its actual name, like whatever the actual bill is called, which I don't remember now off the top of my head, actually, because I was so used to hearing Obamacare and so used to saying Obamacare that I was anticipating saying Obamacare. So when asked, do you like Obamacare, people from across the quote-unquote American ideological spectrum generally responded in a negative way, kind of indicating that the brainwashing had sunk in. When asked, do you appreciate, the American Health Care Act? People went, yeah, for sure. Further proving that most people don't really know what is being argued about. They're just arguing because their ideologues have told them to argue. And so if it falls out of the prescripted bullet point list generated, battle cries, they generally don't know what to say, and so they'll pretend knowledge or wisdom on it and generally hope it's a good thing and say yes. I'm sure if that survey had gone deeper and asked, they would have gotten interesting results. Do you or do you not appreciate Romney care? Right now, Romney is so post-Romney that who knows what kind of points he would get. And the following one, too. Do you appreciate the value of the American Heritage Foundation care? They get really interesting, weird responses. And I say that because people forget that before Obamacare was Obamacare, it was Mitt Romney care, and it was Heritage Foundation care. Why? Because those are the entities that developed the core of the agenda of big, bad, old, scary Obamacare. And the Heritage Foundation used to be, I don't know if it is anymore, and given how crazy divided the GOP has become, which should be no surprise. The entirety of Western civilization is based on the notion of dividing and conquering the subjugated. We are the subjugated, even the politicians. Let's not get confused, folks. The politicians are not the saviors, and they are not the bad guys either. They're getting just as played as the rest of us. Just as hard, you know. And they may sometimes appear to be steering the ship, but that's by leave of those in true control. But zooming back, so this whole thing that everyone's angry and seething about, and that some sort of politically short-sighted part of Trump's base and of some percentage of Republicans' base at large have long been conditioned now to want to repeal and replace. But when the shit hits the fan and you try it, or at least the GOP-controlled legislative branch of government has tried in recent days to render some iteration of that without actually being able to do literally what they promised, which is to fully and completely repeal Obamacare. They couldn't do that, folks. Let's be really clear about that. They didn't repeal Obamacare. They made a bunch of huffle-puffle, bleagity blaggity, new age political woo-woo noise about to flip that. Hey, did you catch that, Vance? How I flipped those terms on their head a little bit? Because we are living in a new age of political bullshittery, and I want to call it political new age woo-woo, just to sort of reclaim those phrases that have been used to abuse me and my worldview. But they really couldn't, they didn't. I digress. They could not replace or repeal it. That was the big hubbub last week about with Rand Paul in his little shopping cart full of office machines, where he was going to Xerox copy or scan this amazing bill that had been under lock and key to protect its security, blah, blah, blah. It was under lock and key because it wasn't done yet, and it was a copy of the actual wording of Obamacare or the American Heritage Foundation's, American Healthcare Act, whatever you want to call it. And they were slowly going to get around to editing it. and in order, they didn't want anybody to see that fact. But looking at it now, breaking it down now, if you haven't heard, they literally tried to just take the money revenue generating and risk distributing aspects of it, the individual mandate and some of the other elements that generate the funds, so that premiums went up this past year. I'm not defending Obamacare. I think the whole thing is nonsense. Are you ready for my mind fuck double flip on what I think is the most important and undiscussed aspect of the story? Or do you want me to lay out some more things about Obamacare for you? Everyone's arguing and fighting. And what's really comical about it is if you were to take a survey, the people who are the most hot under the collar about it probably self-identify as some variation of Christian belief system. Because despite all those who disagree, America really is struggling to maintain the identity and the factual, representation of a Christian nation. If not a majority, then the vast plurality of Trump fans, of GOP hardcore base, the strongest willed of the voters and the loudest of the squeaky wheels and the most sort of adamant in their hate tend to be simultaneously Bible-thumping Christians of some sort, some ilk, of some variation, of some denomination. And here's the irony, folks. If we wanted to get really serious about that portion of the American identity, then the most important question not being asked by anyone in the media, except for maybe in a fucked up, skewed, and irresponsible way by some of the Christian media, is what would Jesus do? And I mean that very seriously, especially in this regard about health care. Because if you dust off your Bible and you crack open to the New Testament and you look at, you got one of those handy dandy red line Bibles, red letter Bibles where the only thing in red is stuff that Jesus said. I wish that was a caller calling in to argue with me already. It's not. It's an alarm to keep me on my toes that I meant this to mute and I forgot to. Forgive for the interruption. I'm going to figure out a call line though, because I do want to be able to announce live airtime moments or upcoming recording sessions and get phone calls. But that requires a second phone line, preferably a landline. And I'm trying to find a good cheap landline deal. So coming soon, listeners. And if you want to help that happen sooner, inbox me directly to make a one-time donation, or visit my Patreon page to sign up to a very affordable $1 a month subscription fee, a sort of volunteerism, anarchy, help fund me page on my patreon.com profile. But as I ask you for money, let's ask the big WWDJ, elephant in the room type question. What would Christ himself, what would Christ consciousness, if it manifested now to kind of advance it to sort of a spiritual new age corner, because I'm not trying to offend people out of this question, but I do want to know the legit answer. I think it's kind of obvious, though. If you've got, if you've got one of those handy-dandy red letter Bibles, you can, or you can just type in BibleGateway.com, Jesus, and curing the sick. If I'm not mistaken, he would say, heal the sick, full stop. Implying, and I think he should have maybe had some foresight to put it a little bit more explicitly, and I think in some iteration of the Bible, some version, some translation that isn't the King James, I think they do, heal the sick for free. He certainly didn't charge any money in any of the instances where he healed the sick. And as the story of the Good Samaritan, which is the next place that we might go to on lessons of, I don't remember if that's early enough in the book that it's Old Testament, but Christ's actions and words and the Good Samaritan together, and you get an obvious lesson of profiteering is not the correct thing to be doing with healthcare statement. And if there's anything that we as a people, as a nation, have to wrap our minds around, some of us already have, spiritually inclined folks, sort of progressive thinking folks, and people from all corners. But we need to help lift up the rest, especially the most sort of rabidly blind members of the extreme right that are supporting their leadership in destroying healthcare, while they rattle the sword of how dare the Democrats destroy healthcare. And let's admit it, folks. Both parties have been in on the same back and forth, good cop, bad cop bullshit game for the last 40 years. The entirety of all of our lives, when politicians get to a deep enough level, they toe the real, bipartisan line, which is to play the drama out, but really sort of slippery slope it, 2 steps forwards, 3 steps back, so you feel like you're making progress, but you're secretly always backsliding, trying to, profiteer the most on us through the manipulation, corruption, and just sort of mind fuckery of all that in healthcare and in other areas where legislation and governmental power have reached into our lives and our relationship with nature and our relationship with having healthy lifestyles. Anything that falls into that sort of nexus, and we've been conned and gerrymandered and tricked, and I'll put it in harsh, brutal terms. We've been gently fucked into taking it up the ass, folks. Because the highest order ideal, Christ himself, and for those who don't like that, Buddha, Gandhi, whoever you look up to, who was a spiritually in tune and arguably awakened master of just comprehending the human spirit and the process of life and the sort of calling from on high, from the highest source, or from the higher power, the divine energies, or the thing you want to call God. The basic message has always been the same: unconditional love, taking care of each other, not for profiteering's sake, but for the wellness of all in the process of being alive. And that was fun and most healthy for us to do. We've been fooled into not being allowed to have that. We've been fooled into thinking that somebody's got to make money. Nobody's got to make money. We made money up. Jesus didn't have any truck with money. Who took the money? Judas took the money. Judas profited and profiteered. And what that get him? Not a whole heck of a lot if you consider that he was dead by the end of the story. By his own hand, of course, but out of guilt and remorse. Which is, the way in which the cosmos will teach us the lesson we need to learn. We always need to take a step back. Whatever we're fighting about, fighting each other, against each other about, because if we think about it, that's what our culture forces us to do. Oh, healthcare is screwy and not very good. We have to fight for healthcare. Who are we fighting? Each other? Our oppressors? If it's a fight, then they're oppressing us. And as Americans, never mind what religion we believe in, as Americans, this is a land of the free, motherfucker. They shouldn't be oppressing us. So we have a political problem at that level, and we have to hold them accountable. And the protesting and the movements that are converging need to clarify their minds a little bit, in my humble opinion, and organize. Always organize. And we need to organize not just about how we're going to march, or what place we're going to march at, or under what banners we're going to march, or who's going to speak. But we need to organize around what ideology we're challenging and what ideology we want to change. And one of the big ideological pillars at the center of this postmodern American way of life is that healthcare is not healthcare. It's a profiteering-based remedial business that's about maintenance of disease. It's disease maintenance. And by God, if there's anything Jesus and Muhammad and Buddha and everybody else, whoever woke up and was killed for it, or shunned and ridiculed and almost killed for it, if they weren't, because there was a couple that sort of made it to old age, like the guy who started the Baha'i faith. Very cool faith. This guy would be standing up. They'd all be standing together if they were here right now to shame every organized religion that isn't a free, that isn't a free hospital in and of its own practice. But if you think about it, Jesus was a doctor without borders. He was the first doctor without borders. He walked around as far as he can get around and healed people. Did he heal people with magic, with prayers, or maybe with knowing some medicine of the traditional, ancient mystic kind that really heals, and maybe, knew how to distill a cannabinoid tincture? Most of American Christianity is either ignorant of or willfully opposed to the idea that maybe, just maybe, the man they call Jesus Christ traveled to India and studied there during his missing years, between his bar mitzvah and when he comes back to teaching the world in his hometown and whatnot in his 30s. But that's plenty of time, especially back in that era with such little distraction. Plenty of time to go and study Ayurvedic, energy healing, anything from Qigong to what's the other cool one? Reiki, to basic fundamental yoga and meditation, and achieve a deep, profound healing practitioner level, and have all of that get swept under the rug in the Gospels. So plausible. And I've done, I've done the kind of reading of a cynic that's like, well, did he or didn't he? And I, tried to figure that out. And while it's hard to lay down a 100% confirmed thing, it's one of those things that should be more generally included in our understanding of the person we call Jesus Christ. Another fun little known fact, while we're getting into this discussion of what would Jesus do, and this is a hardcore fact, that if a Christian hears this and goes, no, that can't possibly be true, they really need to take the beam out of their eye, as it says in the Bible, because they're not able to help any of their friends right now because they can't see what the true is. The true is, if you do the historical research, Christos and Jesus are both labels used against petty criminals, especially those of the political dissent, political opposition kind, because Christ himself was a radical rebel who stood up against the oppression of his era, the man oppression, the human greed, Illuminati, 1% rich people against the poor people kind of oppression. He stood up against that and said, whoa, Pharisees, what the fuck are you guys doing? You're corrupting the religion and getting in bed with corrupt government in order to oppress your own people. And this has got to stop. And I'm sure that any one of them came back and watched 5 seconds worth of fucking news on what the last 8.5 to 9 years of Obamacare clusterfuck politics has been going on over the very simple subject of healing the people. All of them would come back and hang their heads in shame with Captain Picard in that facepalm, like in the Captain Picard facepalm meme. they would all just sit there and be like, fucking hell, people, the hell are you doing? And I'm not saying that because I believe myself to be any more special than anybody else. As always, I think I need to include the disclaimer that my intonation or my indignation is not some claim to self-righteousness. I don't think that I'm an ascended master. I don't think it takes becoming an ascended master to comprehend the messages of the ascended masters of our ancient days, and to know that if Jesus Christ were here and he could speak on Capitol Hill and make a speech to the joint chambers of Congress and the president and the American people, he would say, love yourself and love thy neighbor as yourself, and heal everybody for free, motherfuckers, because you can. Because profiteering is not only imaginary, in other words, it's a thing we made up, and all of its reliant systems are things we made up, and we can change that which we make up whenever we want, so that it is not unfair, unbalanced, and unjust, and abusive, and profiteering, and oppressive, and destroying people's lives. It doesn't need to be that way by some mysterious force of impossible economic probability. No, it can be defined any way we want because it's an ideology. And also, you have the power and the strength and the ability and the karmic will and the Christ consciousness energy magic to heal people directly through the invocation of cosmic functions. So why would you need to profiteer on it when everyone can heal everybody else and themselves through some simple practice / training? I think that's what they would say. And then they would say, shame on you. I love you, I forgive you, now fucking fix it. Because that's your job. Your job is to stop arguing over nonsense ideology about how healthcare is supposed to work, on what can and cannot be done according to economic nonsensical nonsense about healing people, and get about the godly business of healing people. Because that is just take the New Testament seriously for a hot minute. That is what Jesus asked us to do. That is what Jesus asked us to do. And this country sits, very self-contradictingly calling itself a Christian nation, rebelling against that identity as a Christian nation, all the while, all this arguing over ideas about what is and what is not meant by Christian nation, and what is and is not meant by religious freedom, and what is and is not meant by healthcare reform, instead of just doing what they asked us to do. All of the ascended masters asked us the same thing: to practice cosmic love, because it is an energy in the cosmos, to heal ourselves and to heal each other. Not jack each other off with this political bullshit about we're going to repeal, we're going to replace, we're going to redefine, we're going to, after claiming for months that it's collapsing in on itself, we're going to take the bottom of the Jenga puzzle pieces out so it does. And then you guys get mad at us, and then somehow we pin it on good old Obama, which is what I think they thought they were thinking when they did what they just did. Because all that's going to happen, to the best of my understanding of what the new AMA looks like, the American Healthcare Agreement, whatever the title is, and I hope they call it Trump Care. I hope from right now, as of right now, this second, they start calling it Trump Care, so that sticks, so that when the American people, if the American people don't rise up and hold them accountable to all of these points, why aren't you being Christ-like, all you crazy Christians that pretended to pretend to have dinner with Jesus every Friday. Why aren't you being more Christ-like and redefining healthcare as something that we provide for everyone without anyone profiteering, because we don't have to. And everyone who works in that gets a decent income, and maybe we start questioning what income and monetary rules we actually uphold as real, and which ones we go, oh, that just makes it worse, and stop upholding as real. Because that's what Jesus would do. I dare a Christian to I know we could get into all kinds of debate here, but I dare anyone from any side of the spectrum to tell me, no, that's not what Jesus would do. Jesus would pull out his AK-47 and kill them all, right? I'm sure someone would try to argue that, and then I'd be like, well, son, you need to stop drinking the Kool-Aid being pumped out by the NRA, because you're falling for it. You're falling for the straight-up Christian reprogramming. And that's what we get to. That's the biggest problem in America. That's the elephant in the room. This is a country full of so many contradictions and so many lines of division and so much arguing going on between its parties, between its religions, and within its own factions. There's intra-factional argument going on. Christians fighting with Christians, Republicans fighting against Republicans, Democrats fighting with Democrats, etc., etc., etc. Every American label you can think of that is supposed to be some important pillar of American society is bifurcated, divided, and encountering more fissures, developing more cracks of dissent and division. And there's a general theme of opposition to the government itself overall, and sometimes it's because of Trump, sometimes it's because of the Republican Party, sometimes it's the totalitarian wish to remove or control all of government that's motivating that. And we need to stop and step back. We need to stop and step back and breathe and hold ourselves accountable to the simple facts that no matter what label we adopt or how we change the labels that we work with, corruption needs to be addressed, and reimagining it so that it's uplifting and sustaining and about thriving for everyone and not an elite few is the most important prerogative as we reinvestigate how to organize our human activities. And maybe checking in with our spiritual foundations and acknowledging all of the corruptions that have become commonplace, that are pitting us against ourselves in a blind rage that induces a kind of political ignorance, a willful ignorance of the fundamentals. And the fundamentals being that love is supposed to be at the core of all of activities. Love is supposed to be the energy that we choose to use to manifest all of our organizational procedures as human beings. Not because I say so, not because Jesus says so, not because any one religion or another is more correct than the other, but because that has always been the truth itself. The cosmos is true. The reality we call the universe is true. Economics is an imaginary idea. So when we look at the cosmos and perceive it directly, instead of through the filters of ideology, we understand that the cosmos itself is about healing. Because the cosmos itself grows. The cosmos itself is a living being that manifests and generates energy frequencies, and that the full spectrum of energy frequencies, from bloody death and murder and self-destruction, and all the way in the opposite direction to unconditional, uplifting, thriving love, all of those frequencies exist. And they are a choice on on our path as we live through this singularized life experience. The illusion of separation is very tricky. It's very persistent, and it's very convincing, but it's also ridiculously easy to sort of shrug off like a winter coat and go, I recognize it, that it is an illusion. I still have to contend with it and operate within its illusion, because it's very, while it's easy to shrug off like a winter coat, you got to put it back on, because it's mostly winter here all the time. That was perhaps a weak analogy, but I think it helps make sense. But we need to strive towards that sort of understanding and get past our lack of recognition, of our own humanity, because that's what drives it. We have been conditioned away from humanism, not as an ideology, but the phenomena. The thing about isms is that it gets tricky because people confuse the ideological construct, which says you should do this according to this theory or this thinking or this logic, and then the world would be a better place. And the phenomena of experiencing the truth, the emotional truth of that then inspired the ideological construct to be defined. Most isms have some emotive, sensational truth, some phenomenal process that exists. And humanism or humanitarianism is about feeling a deep-rootedness in our own frail human self, understanding its profound divinity, and clearly recognizing that relationship, that dynamic exists within ourselves as individuals, and therefore, because it exists within all of ourselves as individuals, we can all identify with that truth. Therefore, despite whatever indoctrination against others or towards the minimization of others, we can understand that all others are another me, right? So they must all also feel like myself. They must all also connect to I am, which is the fundamental core undeniableness of the center of our phenomenological experience, this sensation of immutable point of perception. I am this process. Behind labels and conditioning, there is a raw, concrete sense of being. And the more we are clearly in tune with that process, or perceiving that process itself, because we're given a tool of mirrors. Our ego is a mirror. Everything is a mirror for our hardest, truest self, which is in and of itself sort of a mirror process to the grander self, the higher energy self, etc., etc. And what does that have to do with healthcare? All of it, on many levels. Jesus didn't bring Lazarus back out of the tomb and back from what was perceived of as death by, with the help of lawyers or insurance companies or premiums and copays and any of that shenanigans, did he? He invoked it. He called forth the given name, which is a kind of, if you think about it, sort of magic spell. We give children names. And spell, for those of you who understand the etymology, or is it entomology? I get those two confused because they're so darn closely spelled, but one is bugs and the other is words. But if you understand the root of words, spelling and spell casting have deep connections. Some argue that spelling is a contraction of spell casting. But that would be an interesting thing, and would argue that magic spells go so far back as to originate from before we had sentences, written anyways, but we were talking. And if you understand the way that the sort of developmental logic of trying to make at least an educated guess at word etymology or entomology, whichever one's correct, spelling and spell casting and the ideas inherent in those, the deep, they have a common source. Christ called forth Lazarus and healed him from whatever deep state of near death or death-like incapacitation, or maybe he was truly 100% dead. I don't know. But he did it using a verbal sort of calling out. And if we believe, and it's literal, then man, the dude worked magic. If it's symbolic, there's a lot of symbolism you can get there pertaining to duality, non-duality, and sort of the I am you and you are me only by another name, which is significant. Because then there's, if I know your name and you know mine, and we know that we are each other just operating different, meat puppet vehicles, and there's magic, then we can probably achieve magical things. My take on the Bible and all religious texts lies somewhere way in the middle between all the extreme polemics you can try and take on it. I do not take any religious text as 100% absolute literal truth. I do think that all texts have both literal truths and deeply meaningful, symbolic, encoded, mathematic, sacred geometrical truths. And I also know that, like any human endeavor, there's a lot of clusterfuck of bullshit going on. And that the bullshit detector, the way of telling them apart, has to do with beauty. There's a golden triangle of truth, having to do with beauty and safety. And that's almost our time, folks. That's my gentle reminder to sort of wrap up whatever ramble I'm getting at and get back to the narrative point. I ramble somewhere about the golden triangle of truth, and I'll bring it back in a future episode if I can't find that archive. I don't think it's a published thing right now, but you can test any idea, any ideological construct with this measurement tool. If you, because each boundary is a polemic, and if it falls within that boundary and within all three of the lines drawn, then you've gotten a trifold confirmation that you can't say, oh, this aspect of that idea is false, or this energy about that idea is false, as you can think of it. The names of the boundaries right now escape me, but they're also written in the journal I've got somewhere. I'll get to it. I want to thank you again for listening, and wrap up with our point is we got to hold them accountable for this healthcare clusterfuck before they go, pulling a bunch of people's plans and causing a bunch of problems, real world problems to people on the verge of barely being able to get by. So call them. Postcards are super effective. Do they get there faster? If you didn't know this, a postcard with no envelope will get to your political representative faster because it doesn't need to be scanned or opened or reviewed for safety. It's just a cardboard page. So give them a call, send them a postcard, tell them to do their job and to wait, not to fumble this clusterfuck of repeal and replace, which isn't even really repeal and replace. And, do the same thing with the president. You can send postcards to the White House. Send him love, send him forgiveness, send him prayers. Do not send him negative energy and threats. That gets you nothing but a red flag. Please note, I did that as a public safety announcement. Don't threaten people with hate. You vote energetically for what you want in the universe. So send out the good vibes to everybody, and let's get it done, folks. As always, thanks for listening. Hit me up on social media. If you support what I'm doing and you want to help get me to a place where I can do this half-time, because I have a real job, but I gotta, take time off that real job to make this kind of stuff happen. Hit me up on Patreon or a one-time donation through PayPal. Just inbox me on any of my social media. If you agree or disagree, comment And if you want others to hear and join the conversation, share the show. As always, you can find my other ramblings by looking me up using the term #MrZeppo. May peace, love, and grooviness be with you.